And I want to go ahead and tell you, as we go through this, we're getting in the section now where the rubber meets the road. We're getting into some, let's be honest, just some scary stuff, if you really think about it, especially for those not in Christ. I really think, well, let me just put it like this. Jennifer and I had the chance to, last week, to go see the movie, Do You Believe? And I don't want to give anything away from the movie because it's a wonderful movie. It's made by the people who made the movie God's Not Dead, and just a fantastic movie. But I will tell you this, as you watch the movie, you have all these different stories that's going on, and you think, well, at least I thought to myself, how in the world are they going to put all this together? I mean, it's almost like a soap opera. I mean, they had this couple over here and this couple over there. I mean, and all these different people doing these different things. And you think to yourself, at least I did, how was this coming together to make a story? Well, by the end of the movie, you begin to see all of it works together. And the guy who played the pastor said something fantastic. He said, when we view God's tapestry, we may see things and may not understand it from our perspective how things are going about. But when you see it, God's tapestry coming together, He's got a plan for all things. And as we go through these things, I think we have to keep this in mind. Just as Jesus went to the cross before He was resurrected, as we understand the Bible, we've got to keep the final picture in mind, because there's some intense things coming through these 7 seals that we're going to look at. We're going to look at the first 6 tonight, and then it's going to amp up a little bit more as we go into the trumpets. And then it's really going to amp up by the time we get to the 7 bowls of wrath towards the end of the book of Revelation. So keep that in mind as we go through this. We need not be scared of these things as long as we keep the final picture in mind. Again, if you've missed any of our studies, last week I tried the new computer. It didn't work. Apparently with that computer, you've got to keep the camera on and you can't go off, so you'll be stuck looking at me on the big screen the whole time. So we'll go back to the old computer here so we can see the PowerPoint. But anyhow, we had a makeup video for last week, so you can check all of our studies there. Tonight we're going to look at the first 6 seals. And the way Revelation operates for the first 2 series of judgments is what you have is you'll have 6 judgments happen back to back to back, and then there'll be a pause. And then you'll find the last judgment, the 7th judgment, which leads into the next series. This happens for the seals. This also happens for the trumpets. But by the time we get to the bowls of wrath, I think if I remember correctly, all of them happen, together. And so, you don't have that. But you're going to have a pause. We're going to have 6 seals. We'll have a pause, and then we'll pick up the 7th seal coming in chapter 8. So tonight we're going to look at 3 different sections. We're going to look first at the first 4 seals which are broken, which we find 4 very interesting individuals. We find the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And, numbers hold a symbol, but you're going to see colors also hold a symbol. And Philip, I thought of you as I was looking at this last one, because you see this every day. It'll make sense when we get there. So when we talk about the 4th horseman, they're very gruesome horsemen. And then we're going to look at the 5th seal, martyrs in heaven. And then we're going to finally look at the 6th seal, some heavy-hitting natural events. But this is just the beginning of things. It really starts going haywire by the time we get to the 7 bowls of wrath. So tonight we'll first of all start off with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And so someone would read for us Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 and 2.
And I saw when the lamp opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were the noise of thunder, one of the 4 beasts saying, Come and see. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown that given unto him, he set forth, conquering and to conquer.
Okay, so we find here the first white horseman. And this is actually going to be one of 2 horsemen that you see here, but they're 2 completely different individuals, as you're going to see here in just a moment. You have 4 horsemen. 4 is the number for the earth. And so from the information provided already in the previous 2 chapters, we saw a picture of the throne room in chapter 4. In chapter 5, we noticed that the Father had a scroll which had this first series of judgments, and we found in chapter 5 that there was no one worthy to open the scroll except for Jesus. We saw a tremendous praise scene, but now Jesus is standing there, and I believe what happens is, I think what he did is probably opened the first seal, opened it about a seventh of the way, began reading, and he had another seal. He popped the other seal, continued reading the scroll, and continued with these series of judgments. So now it started. So the Lamb has now begun to open the seals, and one of the living creatures, most likely the first one that John saw, which was one who had the face of a lion, which now if you remember in Ezekiel, they all have 4 faces. These are bizarre looking angels here. Not your chubby winged babies that you see depicted, but these bizarre looking creatures, these cherubs. The first one with the face of a lion invites John up. His voice is like a thunder, which is very powerful, and invites John to come and see what's taking place. Now John sees this rider on a white horse. He goes out fiercely. Now white is normally a symbol of purity and divinity, but here there's a little bit of a deception going on. In the book of Revelation chapter 19, you see a white horseman who is clearly identified to be Jesus. He has the name King of Kings, Lord of Lords. He's coming down. He has his heavenly forces coming down. There's no doubt who that is. This guy sets off a series of events that aren't good. And in fact, what we see, this guy has a bow, a crown, and rode out to be a conqueror. These all held symbols here as well. The bow was, as easily says in his commentary, a long-standing weapon of military conquest. A crown was a term used for a championship given to someone who won one of the Olympic Games. And so the white rider rides out to conquer. Now Jesus has already conquered. This white rider rides out to conquer. So who is this person? This is the Antichrist. And what you're going to see is Satan wants so badly to be God. You have 777, the number of the Holy Trinity. Well, you're going to see in the book of Revelation an unholy Trinity, 666, the number of humanity. You have the unholy Trinity being Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. These are the unholy Trinity. Jesus is called the lion. Satan makes himself out to be a leopard. He wants to be just like Jesus. He wants to be just like God, and he can't, and it drives him crazy. So here you see the Antichrist, and he also represents false religion. He dons himself wanting people to believe in him. This is going to be an individual who's going to issue a promise of peace. He's going to issue all the things in the world. He's going to tell you, he's going to save the world. He's going to set everything right. But truly he will be a deceptive person, because he's going to make everything look good, but he's going to eventually take over, and he's going to be successful. This is the problem. He's going to be successful in what he does. When you think of guys like Hitler, you think of Stalin, individuals like that, they're just a shadow of what this guy will be. I mean, very charismatic person. People will want to follow this guy or girl, whoever it may be. They'll want to follow this person. But little do they know, Satan incarnate basically is a very evil person. And so that represents the white horseman. So we have another horseman on the way. Someone, if you will, read for us verses 3 through 4.
When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come and see." Another horse, fiery red without, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that the people should kill one another, and there was given to him a great sword.
Now there's something, if you follow me on social media, I posted, there's something that I saw on this that I've never seen before. And that's like it's a domino effect. The first horseman, what the first horseman does, the entrance of the Antichrist, he leads the way for the second horseman to come. So in other words, once the Antichrist gets a foothold here, then there's going to be wars. There's going to be people trying to rebel against this kingdom that this guy set up. And the good news is when it come to Hitler, he was conquered. And when it came to these other dictators, he was conquered. But when it comes to this guy, he's not going to be conquered. He's going to set up an established kingdom. A lot of people think, you hear people talk about a new world order. You hear people talking about a global society. It doesn't necessarily say it, but it kind of implies it, that he's going to have a global power. He's going to have a global control over everything. And so because of that, war is going to come out. Now, we've had world wars before. We've had a lot of battles. We've had a lot of things go on. But this is going to be a war on a global scale. As I heard one commentator write, there's not going to be a place where there's not war when this happens. I mean, it's going to be a global epidemic of war everywhere. Red is definitely the symbol for blood, but here it also represents war. The writer was given power to take peace from the earth, so to speak. There wouldn't be any peace. The Antichrist is going to promise peace, but what he'll bring eventually is war with him. He's given a large sword, which brings to mind hand-to-hand combat. And again, some feel that this global war will occur after the Antichrist sets up a global power. And again, this leads to the third horseman. Now, the Antichrist, this false teacher, this false Christ, this Antichrist, he's going to come set up a kingdom. He's going to follow behind that war, and this black horseman is going to follow in behind him. Someone, if you will, read us for us verses 5 and 6.
When he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, "Come and see." And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, "A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. And see thou hurt not the oil of the wine."
Okay, it only follows suit here. You have the Antichrist. There's going to be a global war following this. And because of all the damage done, you're going to have a famine, a global famine set up and take place. You're going to have grain is going to be depleted. There's not going to be much grain left at all. And this is what this is talking about here. There are going to be some things that are left. But the problem with this is with him holding the pair of scales, which is like a balance beam, this is the way they weighed money. I mean, they didn't have like a $5 bill or a $20 bill, or if you're lucky enough, I rarely see one, a $100 bill. They don't have those, but they weighed out their money. And so what this represents is that there's going to be a lot of problem. There's going to be a lot of hungry people, but there's not going to be global supplies to supply the people the food that they need. There will be some things, but here's the problem with this. The way this reads is that it's going to seem like that the Antichrist, this global power that's established, they're going to have the goods. And so if you follow him, or if you follow whoever this Antichrist is, then you're going to be in good. You'll have your needs met. If not, well, you're going to have problems. Wheat and barley are two things that are mentioned here. Wheat was more nutritious, but generally more expensive. Barley was less nutritious, but it was cheaper. Ancient writers indicate that a quart was the standard daily allowance for an adult, but here's the problem. It would require a day's wage to buy nearly enough food for a person. This is the way it seems to read here. If you're trying to supply your family with food, you're going to have problems, you know, the way this is reading. So this is, the good news is this famine is limited. They were not able to harm the oil and wine. But one of the commentators I read said that what this kind of indicates is that inflation in this period is going to go through the roof. You'd have like 1,000, 1,500% inflation during this time. I mean, if you could afford it, you know, you could get by. But again, extra food would come to those who had the means to get it. As you heard the old saying goes, the rich will get richer, the poor will get poorer. This is going to happen on a global scale from what this indicates with this black horseman. And then we meet the gruesome dude here, coming in verses 7 through 8. Someone, if you will, read for us verses 7 and 8 about the green horseman.
named him a settlement went down, and he was fallen. And power was given to him over the course of the earth, to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and all beasts of the earth.
This is really a gruesome picture here, and the problem with this is some of you may have translations that say pale, some of you may have translations that will say green. The term is chloros, and we get our word chlorophyll from it. Chloroform, I think we get that word from it. Or, chlorine, I think it comes from this word. I mean, there's several other things you could use here. The word chloros literally means a pale, greenish gray, and Philip, this is why I was thinking about you, because the work you do, it was typically regarded as a rotting corpse. It was the color of a rotting corpse. This is the color of this horseman. This is a gruesome scene here because what you see, the fourth horseman, he had this greenish gray color which resembled a rotting corpse. And you actually have two characters here. You have sitting on the horse an individual identified as Death, and following beside him by foot is another individual by the name of Hades. Now here's the problem with this picture. When you see the first three horsemen, they seem to, they're like race horses. As soon as they have the gate open, they're just darting out. The Antichrist darting out, war darting out, the third one darting out. This scene is one that was more slow and methodical. You know, if you have these two guys, and it seems to be that Hades is on the side, and you have this Death on the horseman, you see this Death, this Grim Reaper coming, causing death, and Hades behind him sweeping up the debris. I mean, that's the picture you see with this fourth horseman here in this period of time. This horseman, it says that there'll be a fourth of the earth dying by these means or by the beasts of the earth. And so again, it's just a gruesome picture you have here with the four horsemen. And so the Antichrist is going to be one who's going to force people to accept his ways and make false promises of peace. He'll try to coerce, and if that don't work, he's going to force, or whoever it is. Question: how is the Antichrist different from the real Christ? How are their ways different? How are they different? What are some differences you see between this Antichrist and the real Christ? He's going to lie to you. Yeah, that's right.
Our Christ wants you to choose Him. He doesn't force your hand. He wants you to openly choose.
Absolutely. To choose Him as opposed to being forced, that's a big difference there as well. I see a case in point, the rich young ruler came to Jesus saying, what must I do to be saved? And Jesus tells him, he goes off, he's not willing to do it. You don't see Jesus out there with the ball bat saying, you've got to come join me. He doesn't do that. Are there any other differences that you see? Oh, that's a good point. The Antichrist is here to save himself, and Christ is to save everyone else. And that's a very good point. Almost makes you think of some politicians, don't it? Oh. Eventually, yeah, that's true. Are there any others? All right, we come now to the fifth seal, and I have to kind of think that the fifth seal is kind of going along the line with what happens with the first four, because you have the Antichrist, because you have war, and you have famine, and you have death. Obviously, the Antichrist is going to be against Christianity, is going to be against the powers of Christ. And here you see, the picture, I debated about whether to put it on here, but I think they depict what's going on in our day and time. The 21 individuals lined up to be beheaded there in Egypt, 21 Christians. You see the picture in the background of the individuals giving their lives in the Roman arena. Several Christians died in that manner. You see another lady up there who was about to be devoured by wild beasts. I mean, that's what took place. I mean, Nero was so crazy, he would dine, he would eat his suppers with the light of Christians being burned alive. I mean, he was just one warped cookie. One wild, as I heard someone say, a few French fries short of a Happy Meal. And that would definitely describe him. So here we see the martyrs in heaven. So if someone will, read for us verses 9 through 10.
And when we had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony that they bear. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and when they dwell in the world and the earth?
All right, so John traveled around the throne of God. I think I failed to mention this. The first one he came to was the one who had the face of a lion, and that was the first horseman. The second one, well, the angel wasn't the horseman, but either the seal was broken, and then the horseman came. And then he went to the second one that had the face of an ox. And then the second horseman came from after the seal was opened there. And then the third had the face of a man, and then the fourth one had the face of an eagle. So John is basically making his way around the throne of God. And now after all of this takes place, he's standing near the throne, and I'm sure he's wondering, what happened to the martyrs? What happened to the people who were killed during this period of time? What happened to them? Well, and about this time, the fifth seal was opened, and John witnessed the martyrdom of several, or he was about to receive his answer, I meant to say. John sees a heavenly altar beneath the throne of God, and the martyrs, talking about being near the heart of God, they are around the throne, actually under the throne, around the altar, under the very throne of God, close to the heart of God. The souls of the martyrs are near the throne. They call out asking God, when will He avenge their deaths? When are we going to have, when are we going to see justice for this? When are we going to see judgment for this? And so, some people have asked the question, should they have asked that question? Some people ask the question, I think when you look at the justice of God, sometimes you can't help but to ask, when, O Lord, are you going to bring justice for all these things that have taken place? But we see a divine response here in verse 11. So if someone would read verse 11 for us.
And white robe was given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fallen children also and their brethren that should be killed, as they should be killed.
Okay, so each of the souls were given. You have the souls of those who were martyred for the cause of Christ. They were near the throne of God. They were all given a white robe representing their holiness, their good standing with God. Their deaths had been a living sacrifice unto God. In fact, Paul, the last letter Paul ever wrote was the letter to Timothy, which is in 2 Timothy 4, verses 6 through 7. Who knows, it may have been weeks, it may have been days, it may have been, months right before his own execution. Paul writes, For I am already poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I fought the good fight, I finished the race, I've kept the faith. He knew that he was about to be killed and executed, and he was himself beheaded for the cause of Christ. So God's response was threefold. One, the martyrs would be rewarded for what they did. The things we do for Christ, and even especially giving our lives for Him, it means something, and it's going to be rewarded. I don't know what these rewards will be, but it means something. Judgment was also implied, and even Habakkuk in the Old Testament, he asked God, when, O Lord, are you going to do something about the evil of this land? And God gives him the answer, and he says, well, I'm going to bring the Babylonians to bring judgment. And he said, wait a minute, they're more wicked than we are. What do you want to do that for? And then God eventually says, hey, everyone's going to stand before judgment, Habakkuk. I'm going to work this out. It's going to be all right. So judgment was implied, and God has a predetermined time frame in which all things must come to pass. even when we don't understand the things that happen, it serves a purpose. We don't know why, but when you look at the grand design of God, by the time we get to the finish line looking back, we're going to say, oh yeah, okay, that made sense. You know, every detail, I believe. I mean, even some things that we don't understand, God allows some things. It's not that God wishes these things to be so. It's not that God desires these things to be so. But God has a time frame in which all souls He knows will be saved. And so He's just waiting. And that's part of the answer. He's just waiting. So, knowing the fact that God has a predetermined plan, meaning that He knows when the last soul is going to be saved, that He's going to wrap this thing up, does this help with your anxiety of the things to come? I mean, does it help in any way? Does it make it worse, knowing what's coming ahead? Right. That's a good point.
We just have to be prepared because our timetable and God's are not on the same plateau. A lot of times, we think, well, it's getting bad, oh, what's going on? And if you look at the earth, as a whole, from above, you're looking at it, it's not really as bad as we think. Somebody breaks into a house down the street, nobody's going downhill, or somebody's killed and it's terrible. But when you're thinking about mass murder, wars, famine of countries, as that really hit, and we try to push it a lot further than it really is, and you have to think how much is there to come, what the timetable is. But is this the start of it? Is this the middle of it? Is this as bad as it gets? You don't know, so just be prepared because it comes.
And that's a good question, because it seems to me, and I'm sure you guys are the same way, just when you think it can't get any worse, it does, And I think you're right. I think maybe we haven't even seen anything yet, And if you think about the advent of the internet, and I've even heard people say that we already have a global economy. There are some things going on here that's leading in this direction. I mean, are we there yet? Probably not. But there's some things working that's coming together that you have to think, man, alive. I mean, you can get on the computer now and get on Skype or something else and talk to someone across the world. It's the connection is definitely happening there. But you're right. I think that we don't really have that picture from heaven. Well, another question, real quickly to ask, knowing that this pattern is inevitable and knowing that the fact is that as time goes on, persecution is going to get worse. That's what the Bible seems to indicate, that there's going to be persecutions, there's going to be more persecutions. It's just something that's going to happen the more we go towards the end. What kind of comfort can we give someone who may have lost a loved one because of their faith or faced some type of persecution? What type of comfort do you think we could provide someone like that?
That group was specifically mentioned that they were saying that they were going to be with Christ, and as a select few that have perished because of that for their faith, but because of that, they moved to the front of the line.
That's a good way of putting it. They moved to the front of the line. And truth be told, someone facing something like that, I mean, why not? They are, I think, in a way, they kind of earned being in the front of the line there.
And the one that was lost, of course, is whoever who lost that person, if they are Christian and they have faith as well, and they get to see him.
Amen. So the whole fact that they get to see
They
him.
don't feel like that right away, but
Right. Anyone else? All right. Ask and you shall receive. They ask, Lord, when are you going to avenge our deaths? And then God does something big. He does something really big. He brings forth a cataclysmic event. I've got my theory on this. You may have different theories about what this is. But, as I was looking through this, I was trying to decide what in the world happened here. What exactly took place? We're not told exactly. I think we're kind of given some hints as to what it could have been. But there is something big that happens when the sixth seal is opened. So someone, if you will, read for us verses 12 through 14. Again, ask and you shall receive. There was something that happened, and this was not just a regional thing. This was a global scale type of event that happened here with the sixth seal. Some people have said maybe it could be a massive meteor strike. Perhaps it could be a tectonic plate shift, something in the geology of the earth. A big massive shift of some kind. Some of you people have even said maybe it was a divine visitation that happened or something of the sort. Even others, to put this down, has even said maybe this is nuclear warfare. Possible. Whatever caused the earthquake, the quake would shake the foundation of the earth. When God does business, everybody knows it. That's just the truth. When God does business, everybody's going to know it. Whatever caused the earth to quake probably sent up dust and ash into the atmosphere that darkened the globe, because as we move through this, we're going to see some other things that take place that's even bigger than this. But does anybody remember when Mount St. Helens blew up? I was little. I remember bits and pieces of it, but I remember Mom and Dad saying something about there was ash over here on the eastern seaboard after it blew up in Washington. Does anybody remember any of the details of when that happened? And I was trying to remember, going back and remember what Mom and Dad said about it. Or Dad was the one telling me about it, but I don't know if it was it dusty or something, or...
But it wasn't like, there's several states out there that just like that. They couldn't see.
So even here, it was kind of like a dark sky, so to speak. The sky wouldn't clear up. It was kind of... That's the kind of the picture I get with this. Whatever happened was big. It was massive, and it was on a global scale. If you had a volcano go off in Washington and went that far over here, can you imagine whatever this must have been enough to do what it did? We're talking about a huge event. It was enough to darken the sun. It would darken the sky all over the globe. And Isaiah saw something similar to this. He said the sun wearing sackcloth, and Joel 2:31 said this. Now, Amanda, who knows more about environment, to step in here anytime you want to, but the moon reflects the light from the sun to us. So if the sky was blackened, wouldn't the moon become a dark red color? Okay, so it would become a dark red color. I know that they say, like on a summer day when there's a lot of dust in the air and you see the moon, it becomes a real weird red color. I kind of get the impression that this is what's going on here. Again, we had 4 blood moons. I don't think it has anything to do with it. I think there is something massive that takes place. It darkens the sky and the moon becomes red. And this is not just an overnight thing. This is something that's probably going to last and last and last for a while. I think the stars falling that we see later on have something to do with it. Now, some people have said this could be nuclear weapons is fired off. That's possible. But in my opinion, I'm kind of thinking that maybe there's a meteor strike that happens. Because later in Revelation talks about stones weighing a talent falling from the sky. A talent was anywhere between 75 to 110 pounds. How would you like to be under a 110-pound rock falling from space? What does that look like? That's in Flagstaff, Arizona. And in fact, some people believe, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, Amanda, I have heard some people say that they think maybe that's what caused it to be so arid in that area. I don't know. But that's what a meteor strike looks like. And I don't even know that was the biggest that's ever hit the earth. In fact, some people have even said when Sodom and Gomorrah had judgment facing them, there's evidence that something came towards them that took off top of the Alps in Switzerland. And when it came, now the Dead Sea used to be a living area. It used to be lush. It used to have, it was like a tropical island paradise there. When whatever hit, there's nothing that'll grow there anymore. So it just makes you wonder what it could be. So I'm kind of thinking that it is. Now here's another case in point. Here's the planet Jupiter. Now back in 2009, there was a meteor that struck Jupiter. Now Jupiter is, what's the figures here? I mean, you think you can fit 100 Earths inside this planet? Look how big that dark mark is for one hit. I mean, this is a huge planet. And they zoomed in over NASA did July 23rd going on down. I mean, just the expansion that you see going on there. I mean, these things can do a lot of damage. And I'm kind of just wondering if something hit that was big enough, it seems like it would do what the Bible says it did. Now, it could be something else. I'm not saying that's exactly what it is. But it seems to me that could very well be a possibility. Again, the heavens were rolled back as a scroll. I think implying a meteor strike. Some have said nuclear war. It could be. But it gets worse. Whatever hit is strong enough that it shakes the foundation of the earth. The mountains and islands are actually moved from its foundation. So you have perhaps mountains crumbling. You have islands shifting. Hawaii may move up to Alaska or something. I mean, I don't know. You have some wild things going on here. And so when they talk about the sky being rolled back like a cloud or like a scroll, well, that's from a nuclear weapon that was set off in the Pacific Ocean. And notice what that does. And I've been told that a meteor would do something very similar. The clouds would roll back like that if something like that massive were to strike. So, again, the martyrs ask, Lord, when are you going to avenge our deaths? Ask and you shall receive. It seems to be that maybe that's part of it there. Here's another picture taken back in 1960 of a nuclear bomb that went off, a testing they did. And here's a house, before, and there it is afterwards. I mean, it's, imagine that with a meteor strike. I mean, it'd be even worse than that. So, just here, kind of examples. All right, someone, if you will, finish us off with verses 15 through 17.
Every bondman and every freeman hid himself from the wind and the rocks of the mountains. And such the mountains and rocks follow us and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand?
All right, now here's what happens here. You have people running for shelter when this happens. But as they say, death is the great equalizer. This will be a great equalizer as well, because you have kings and paupers residing in the same cave. You have rich and poor. You have slave and free. You have people from all walks of life. And at this time, they realize that the wrath of God has come. I mean, there's no guesswork in it. I mean, they realize that God's judgment has come. And so there's just no question. So why do you think they call this the wrath of the Lamb? Why do you think they call it this? Or the wrath of God? Any takers?
At this point in time, most everybody is on earth all together.
That's right. And I'm glad you mentioned that point, because if there is any faithful left, it would be very few. I don't get the impression, I have a feeling that at some point, it doesn't really say when, but I have a feeling that at some point the church is taken out. In fact, the next chapter even shows the 144,000, which some people believe to be a representation of the church, a figurative number representing the church. And if that's the case, then the church isn't going to see anything else. If they do see this part, they're definitely not going to see anything else that takes place afterwards. So how much of this will we see? Will we still be around? Well, chances may be that we're not. So that's one of the blessings of being in Christ.
Well, I think it was concluding, as we said, most of the followers of Antichrist, but as a parent, you have that intuition where you just know, and they're going to know that it's the wrath of God. They're not going to be, oh, well, why did that happen? How did that happen? They're going to know why it happened.
Right.
And who is in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Definitely going to know there's not going to be any surprise about it. There'll be a surprise that it happened, but, no surprise about who it came from. Yeah. Yeah. And that may have been, there's a big question about when that took place. Did that happen after? Because not everything in Revelation is necessarily in chronological order, so the question is, did that happen afterwards? That's a big debate that people have. So, all right, to close this out, we've been doing a conclusion, but we've already went through everything. I found some principles and applications in this that I think that'll help us put it in perspective. One is that God has set limitations on the amount of damage that humans will cause. Evil will not get the final say. And this is part of the thing that John's demonstrating here. And that's what God is demonstrating through John. Evil's not going to have the final say. Judgment is coming. As old was it Jonathan Edwards said, there's a payday coming someday. I believe he's the one that said it. Evil's not going to get the final say. The number of Christian martyrs will unfortunately increase as we anticipate the return of Christ. But what we can find here is that we need to be faithful to Christ even unto death, because there is a great reward. In fact, when we give our lives to Christ, the Bible says we die unto Him, die daily unto Him, and to live unto Him. So the deaths of the saints will not be in vain, and God will avenge their deaths. Martyrdom will be rewarded. And God does sometimes use natural disasters to bring judgment at times. Now, why and how? Does that mean that every time a tornado hits, someone's done something wrong? Well, not necessarily. But I do think that we see through Scripture that God does use natural events sometimes for judgmental purposes. As catastrophes occur, one thing we can be reminded of is that these things are, as Jesus said, are like birth pains. Just signs of the times that as we're going to be resurrected, the heavens and the earth are also going to be resurrected. There's coming a day when all of this will be past history, when there's going to be new bodies, there's going to be a new heaven, a new earth, and everything's going to be the way God had planned for it to be in the beginning. So let's keep that in mind as we go through this. I mean, there's some intense stuff in Revelation, but just keep the final picture in mind as we go through this. And one thing I think you also can find in this, a very important thing, when people turn away from God, when societies turn away from God, when people turn away from God, when nations turn away from God, very bad things happen. And that's just a natural result of sin. When we don't have God in our lives, when we don't have God in society, bad things are going to follow. And I think we can clearly see that the more our times turn away from God, the more evil things do become. Anybody else with a question, comment before we close? All right, next week we're going to take a look at the mystery of the 144,000 and the great multitude. We had some bad news. I like how Bob put it. We know things are going to get bad. They're going to get worse, but eventually they're going to get better. We had some bad news in chapter 6. We've got some very good news in chapter 7. And then chapter 8, we go into the next series of judgments that's going to take place after that. So if nobody has anything else, I want to ask, Tommy, would you mind closing us with prayer?
people